As we are beginning glaze, it's important to know the difference between glaze and paint. There are some pretty big differences. With paint, what you see is what you get. When you apply the paint, as soon as it dries, it's done. Glaze is not that way. Glaze has to go through a chemical reaction. And within that glaze, it's like little pieces of sand, which when you add water and stir it up to, you can paint with a brush and put it on your pottery. Some places will even let you spray it on, like spray paint, or dip it. But we're going to paint with a brush when we put it on. So, like I said, glaze is not finished until it goes through the kiln. You got to think like Minecraft. Think like Minecraft. When you put sand in the furnace in Minecraft, those of you Minecrafters, you get glass, and that's sort of like what glaze is. It's not exactly sand. It's a bunch of different chemicals when mixed together and turned and put on in the kiln. It becomes molten glass, and then it adheres forever to the glaze. So some things to think about with that. First of all, it's a chemical, not a paint. So this glaze is called golden aspen, and when you open it up and look inside, it looks like it's going to be a rusty red color, but that is not what it does. When it goes into the kiln and becomes fired, it comes out looking like this. That's the sample. And then I've got a lot of, this one is called tuxedo. And a lot of students will say, Mrs. DuPont, I can't find any black. All you have is gray, because they see the color and they think it's gray. But actually, tuxedo, like this, if I get that out of the way, very black. So how you can know for sure, a lot of times I have samples in the classroom, but if that's not available to you, you can always Google it. This is Mako SC15 tuxedo. You can Google that and you can see an example, pretty good example of what it looks like. The other thing to consider is that because glaze goes through that chemical chains and inside the kiln becomes molten glass, it permanently sticks to whatever it touches. Which means that if I put glaze on the bottom of my pot and I put it on the shelf of the kiln, it's going to stick to the bottom forever. And the only way that I can ever get it off the bottom of the kiln, yes, I'm sorry to say, it's very sad. So make sure that you don't put any glaze at the bottom as you're painting it. Just leave a blank spot. In fact, I'm going to go over this again in more detail because it's really important. I want to make sure that you have a white spot there along the bottom of along the bottom where it's just not any glaze on it at all. You also need to know that glaze is really expensive, so you don't want to waste a drop, you don't want to ruin it. So I want to make sure that I'm using a clean brush when I dip inside. If you're using the kind of glaze that you dip inside, make sure that your brush is clean. And like this brush, you can tell it does have glaze on it, but it's the same color that I'm using. So I don't really have to wash the brush. It's okay to use it again. If you're not sure, then wash the brush, but definitely don't go, oh, I'm gonna paint with this color and then I'm just gonna put it in this color. Like you're gonna ruin the glaze for everybody. So be careful with that. Don't waste any glaze. Now, if you are using the kind of glaze that's like this glaze that's comes in a bottle and I'm not going to be able to dip my brush in, we are not going to do like we do with paint where we put it on a palette and mix it up and then throw out the rest. We're not going to waste a single drop of this. So you're going to just pour it directly on your brush like toothpaste. And then you're going to apply it to your pot. Like this. Nice. All the way down. I'm going to stop before I get to the bottom. If you accidentally get some on the bottom, it's okay. I'll tell you what to do about that in a minute. You go all the way around. It helps to remember to have a starting point. So I mean, this has a handle, so I can start there, and I'm going to go all the way around. The number that you want is 3. 3 is a general rule. If you have 3 layers, it'll be really thick, and you won't really be able to see through it very much. If you do 1 layer, it'll be thinner. So say you have a texture that you really want to show up, you might just do 2 layers. But say you have some fingerprints and things in there that you don't really like, coat on those 3 layers. But help yourself remember how many layers you got by remembering where you started. I'm going to start at the handle, and I'm going to go all the way around 1, and then again, 2, and then one more time, 3. Don't forget the inside. And for the bottom, if you do get any glaze on the bottom, it's not a big deal. I would recommend everyone go and wipe your bottom one time. Anyway, even if you didn't get any. Let's say I've finished glazing this whole thing. Let's just pretend I did. And I've got a wet rag, and I'm gonna go around and I'm just gonna wipe the bottom real good. And I'm gonna go around the edge here too and wipe around the corners. You can see that. So that there is a little white ring all along the bottom. So let me show you exactly how big about that ring. This one has a really small little ring around the bottom of white. That is only visible if you put your pot down and you squat down to it eye level and spin it around and make sure that there's always a little white ring along the bottom. You don't need a huge white ring like this one. That's a little too unnecessary and you probably don't like the way that looks. You guys are big kids. I just don't have time to go around and wipe everybody's bottom before I put it in the kiln. So you really got to make sure that your bottom is wiped. If it's not wiped, not putting it in the kiln, okay? So now you have some questions. First question you're going to ask is, can I mix the glaze colors? Yes, of course you can, with some rules involved. First, it's not paint, so it doesn't mix like paint. You think you're mixing red and white, you'll probably get pink, right? Probably. What exact shade of pink? Who knows? Just be comfortable with surprises. Just be comfortable. Glazes are very surprising. Just be happy with surprise. The other thing that's limited is you're not going to mix it in a palette and chuck it at the end because, like I said, this is expensive and we're not wasting a single drop. So what you can do is you can say, I'm going to do one layer of black, and then I'm going to do one layer of white, and maybe I will mix it in. You could let that dry, and then I could go back with the white, add another layer. It's going to look like stained glass. If you had a black glass and you had a white glass on top of each other, that's what it would kind of look like. Some students have had luck kind of stirring the next color into it and blending it around. That would be kind of cool. I've seen students blend like 3 layers of white and it fades to black. You can do that. This glaze can get really painterly. So students say, I've got a really cool pottery piece here with eyes and a mouth and all these things, and I wanted to paint little spots for the little suction cups, and I wanted the eyes different. Yes, you can go for it. You can be pretty painterly, especially if you're using the Mako Stroke and Go. It's really lets you do a lot of paint, doesn't run a whole lot. This is an example of some different paints, different glazes that have been done with the Mako Stroke and Glow. So you can see that they've really gotten painterly with it. And the last point I just want to emphasize as a review, you're going to do 3 layers, I'd say 2 to 3 layers of glaze. Don't waste any, and be sure you wipe your bottoms. Remember, you got to have that little white ring. If you set it down and look at it eye level and spin it around, you're going to see a little white ring all along the bottom. Check the bottom, make sure there's no glaze. So if there's any glaze on the bottom, I'm not going to put it in the kiln. Have fun. Be happy with surprises. You're going to love your piece of pottery.